To meet here. My name is Tomasz Łuszczek. I study formal linguistics at the University of Warsaw. I do phonology in particular. I'm interested in phonology, and this is what I'll focus on today. Here's the topic of my presentation once again: the vocalic system of Goralian, opacity and final tensing as an argument for level distinction in OT. Before we begin, let's have a quick look at the agenda for today. I'll start off with some background information concerning the Goralian dialect. Then I'll have a look at Goralian vowels, and I'll try to resolve some problems. The closing slides of this section present vowel contrasts. Further, having presented a data sample, I will expand upon final tensing, a phonological rule operating in Goralian. Ultimately, optimality theory will be introduced. A brief discussion of the theory is followed by the analysis. I will show that OT, standard OT, cannot handle the Goralian data. Okay, so Goralian, or Podhale Goralian, is a dialect of Polish spoken in Podhale, in the south of Małopolska, which is next to Podkarpackie, the southernmost voivodeship in South Poland, basically. Podhale is a geographical term designating the mountainous region of South Poland, as you can see on the map. Goralian, the name Goralian, has been coined by Professor Jerzy Rubach, and it is derived from Polish góra, which translates to mountain. Analogically, Goralians are Polish Highlanders who inhabit Podhale. It is debatable where the line separating the Goralian speakers from the standard Polish speakers should be drawn on the map, as this one. And this problem does not fall within the purview of my presentation. Yet all I can say for sure is that Goralian is flanked by the dialects of speech on the right on the map, and by the dialects of Orava on the left. At the bottom, as we can probably see, the Polish-Slovak frontier marks the southern edge of the Goralian's homeland. This dialect has been spoken in this region for centuries, and I say has been, so most importantly, it is still alive. I take great pride in being a native speaker of Goralian, but I'm even more thrilled that the Goralian phonology is finally entering academic discourse. Let me add that my presentation today is the first formal analysis of Goralian. What's important, the discussion and the analysis are conducted in line with the current paradigms in phonology. Although Goralian has attracted the attention of many linguists since the birth of linguistics in Poland, the literature on the synchronic phonology of Goralian barely exists. This is why all the data I use come from the fieldwork I carried out myself in Janisz, which is a sizable village in the heart of Podhale, the place where I was born and raised. I marked Janisz as a circle on the map. In terms of the classic cardinal vowels diagram, the vocalic system of Goralian looks as follows. As you can see, Goralian has one low vowel, 4 mid vowels, and 3 high vowels. So basically all the vowels included on the diagram. For comparison, I show the Polish vocalic system simultaneously. The Polish vowels are those in black exclusively. A glimpse at the diagram reveals that the Goralian system is richer than that of standard Polish. Specifically, unlike Goralian, Polish has no vowels in the upper mid section. This is shown on the diagram, obviously. The vowels in red mark the points of difference between the two systems. Now, one basic principle of modern phonology is to classify speech sounds in terms of binary distinctive features. Typically, a vocalic inventory of a language can be successfully classified using 4 such features, and these features are plus minus high, back, low, and plus minus round. This is totally true of the Polish system, as you can see. However, Goralian appears problematic at this point. The problem concerns the 2 central vowels and the 2 upper mid vowels. So the questions we need to answer are: what is the status of Goralian Ö and A vis-à-vis the feature plus minus back? And what feature would prove distinctive for the class of mid vowels in Goralian? cliffhanger? Actually, yes, because let me digress a little before we find the answers. As visualized on the slide, the circles in orange mark the approximate field of articulation of the two central vowels. The thing is, the place of articulation of a vowel is always an approximation. Phonetically speaking, every vowel operates within a certain field, and the exact point of articulation of a vowel may differ across speakers. This is especially true of vowels which have no neighboring segment horizontally, because such a segment, neighboring segment, limits the scope of a vowel, which tends to be scattered this much. Yet one phonetic fact, which is noteworthy in my opinion, is that the Polish high central vowel is pronounced farther to the back than its standard Polish counterpart. For instance, it is almost as retracted as its Russian equivalent. Clearly, it is also clearly tense. Still, let me add that these facts have no bearing on phonology whatsoever, because they are pure descriptive facts belonging to the study of phonetics. Ad rem. Every major theory of features requires that each vowel be specified for the feature plus minus back. Technically speaking, vowels I and R are central, so the decision regarding their backness lies outside of the scope of phonology. Thus, in order to resolve this problem, we need to resort to phonology. One way of telling whether a vowel is plus back or minus back is to see how it behaves with regard to a certain phonological rule. For instance, it is typologically attested knowledge that palatalization is caused by front vowels, that is, by minus back vowels. Let's see the example. Mróz, which stands for frost. A. The vowel from the diminutive suffix ik triggers the change of z to ż, mrozik. B. The inflectional suffix e triggers the same change, mrozie. These vowels are front vowels phonetically, but I've just shown that they are front vowels, that is, minus back vowels, from the phonological point of view. Now C. The suffixes I and a clearly do not cause palatalization as testified here. Mrozy, mroza. So, I conclude that both Goralian I and a must be characterized as plus back. This decision is supported by Goralian phonology. The red line draws the cutoff point in this horizontal division for the feature plus minus back. Recall the second conundrum. It pertains to the Goralian mid-vowels I, O. Since the system contains 4 vowels in this region, in the mid-region of vowels, a successful featural classification of Goralian vowels calls for one more feature. The thing is, the feature plus minus advanced tongue root, that is plus minus ATR, divides vertically each of the 3 regions into upper and lower. So, therefore, the upper high, upper mid, and upper low vowels are plus ATR. Other vowels are minus ATR. I summarize the discussion in the following feature chart. In the light of the adduced evidence, it is undeniable that the feature plus minus ATR is a crucial component of the successful feature classification of Goralian vowels. Such a choice is a sure bet, because this feature successfully grasps the contrast between the lower mid and upper mid vowels. Let me move on to the presentation of vocalic contrasts. I postulate that all Goralian vowels are underlined. This is tantamount to saying that all of them are phonemes. The best way to prove such a claim is to show that they appear in contrastive distribution. To this end, I proceed with presenting minimal or near minimal pairs. I, cyna, cyna, grzyb, grzyb, szczyt, szczyt, syn, syn. I, nikt, nik, likier, lik, lipa, lip, świń, swędzić. O, dron, droga, rok, róg, moc, moc, sol, sól, sył, seł, pościel, ciele, oddech, zdechnąć, chleb, ślepiec, ultimately o. Bóg, Bóg, pług, płukać, wzór, wzór, duch, dom. This is it. Now let us move on to data. I present my data sample, the alternation between and o. The cases, genitivus singularis and nominativus singularis. Chleba, chleb. Brzegu, brzeg. Celu, cel. Śniega, śnieg. Pogrzebu, pogrzeb. Zabiegu, zabieg. The same for o. Boru, bor. Roga, rog. Drobiu, drog. Wora, wor. Stwora, stwór. Roju, roj. We can observe that the lower mid vowels o alternate with the upper mid vowels o respectively. The context for the alternation is always the same. That is, tense and tense o appear before a word final voiced consonant. Now, knowing that all the root morphemes listed above have an underlying lax mid-vowel in the alternating position, we may say that the Goralian lower mid-vowels are tensed before a word final consonants, which are voiced. Specifically, o raises to o, while e raises to I. The generalization responsible for this change is called final tensing, which I state semi-formally as a rewrite will below. Schematically, final tensing, o e changed to o I before a consonant, which is both word final and voiced. I will now carry out the formal analysis of final tensing, a phonological rule operating in Goralian, the fact that I have just shown. The analysis is set within the framework of optimality theory. I will demonstrate that OT cannot handle the process in question because we encounter a ranking paradox, namely, the opaque interaction between final tensing and final devoicing requires different ranking of the same set of constraints. The closing section argues that this problem causes no difficulty for derivation of optimality theory. Optimality theory, OT, is a formal framework for grammar analysis where rules, familiar from the generative paradigm, are stated as rankings of viable constraints. These constraints evaluate an infinite number of candidates. The ultimate goal is to select one of the candidates as optimal. In short, OT evaluation is mapping of an input onto an output. It begins in the lexicon, the place where all the words of a language are stored. Generator, marked as gen, produces by default an infinite number of candidates for a given input. Ultimately, in the course of evaluation, the optimal candidate is selected, also called the harmonic candidate. And this candidate is the actual output. The optimal candidate is the one that is most harmonic, which means that it causes the least serious violation of the relevant constraints. Speaking of constraints, we distinguish two types of constraints, markedness and faithfulness constraints. This constraint dichotomy is an inherent property of OT. In plain prose, faithfulness mandates that the input, or a given element of the input, be identical as its output correspondent. So the main goal here is to preserve some features of the input in the output. A typical faithfulness constraint is identity, followed by some specification. Faithfulness is responsible for marked forms in language. On the other hand, markedness constraints exert pressure towards unmarked structures. The goal of markedness is to improve a phonological structure. Markedness constraints push the given input towards unmarked forms. In other words, they minimize marked forms in language. The opposing forces of faithfulness and markedness are inherently conflicting. Ideally, these competing forces are to yield harmony. However, languages differ in resolving the conflict between faithfulness and markedness. That is, a language may give priority to either of the forces. Okay, having done this, I present the list of relevant faithfulness constraints. We call the rule of final tensing now. These identity constraints are needed to make sure that the low emit vowels do not change into high vowels or low vowels. Therefore, I use ident minus high, ident minus low, ident plus back, and ident minus ACR. Turning quickly to markedness, I restate final tensing as a markedness constraint. It is called final tensing, and it prohibits lax vowels before a word final voiced consonant. Given these constraints, the evaluation for chlib proceeds as follows. Note that the right pointing hand shows the optimal candidate, and an exclamation mark means that the candidate has been eliminated. Candidates A and D violate final tensing. They have asterisks, since they have lax vowels in the position before a word final segment. Candidate E satisfies final tensing because U is tense. However, this vowel, being plus high, incurs a fatal violation of ident minus high. Candidate C fares well with three identity constraints, as the relevant vowel is upper mid. Nonetheless, it loses to ident plus minus back, for obvious reasons. Candidate B has tensed A to A. Yet this change is the least serious offense, because the violated constraint is ident minus ATR, and this constraint is very low in the ranking, as you can see at the very end. Consequently, chlib is the winner. But is such a form really attested in Goralian? Please note that the four constraints on the left are equally ranked with respect to each other, but they all are ranked crucially higher than ident minus ATR. In other words, I postulate only one crucial ranking. The evaluation presented just now selected chlib as the optimal candidate. However, a descriptive fact about Goralian says that final obstruents must be devoiced. This is due to the operation of final devoicing. Therefore, it emerges that the optimal candidate selected above is incorrect. The desired output is chlib, with B changed to P, the bilabial voiceless obstruent. Final devoicing is responsible for devoicing obstruent word finally. It is processed in OT through the interaction of two competing constraints. One of them prohibits voiced segments word finally, the other ensures that the future plus voice of an input segment is preserved on the output correspondent of that segment. Below I present the relevant constraints and their ranking. Okay, the markedness constraint, don't be a voice obstruent before a word boundary, prohibits word final voice obstruents. So candidates A and B fail at the very outset. The two candidates still at play incur one violation each for ident plus voice, so it's a tie at this stage. Yet the desired candidate D has a tense vowel, thus it violates ident minus ATR. C is the undesired winner because there is no tensing of the vowel. In short, we end up with a ranking paradox. The thing is, in order for final tensing to work, we must rank ident plus voice above the markedness constraint. Don't be a voice obstruent word finally. However, since Goralian obstruents are devoiced word finally, ident plus voice must be crucially ranked below the markedness constraint. It is an overt contradiction. We cannot derive a tense vowel if the ranking prohibits voice obstruent word finally. In consequence, albeit it is actually possible to derive a tense vowel in OT grammar, as I showed in the first row, the optimal candidate of such evaluation is not attested in Goralian. This is because it ends with voice obstruent. This is actually a perfect example of opacity. There is an opaque relation between final tensing and final devoicing. If we look at the relevant output form like chlib, final devoicing erases the context in which final tensing is operative. This problem cannot be handled by OT. I conclude that Goralian final tensing is not amenable to an analysis such within standard optimality theory. This analysis can be easily salvaged by DOT because in accordance with DOT's principal tenet, phonological evaluation proceeds in steps. Specifically, the theory recognizes 4 levels of evaluation: the stem level, the word level, the clipper level, and the sentence level. Given the present analysis, DOT evaluation proceeds as follows. At level 1, we do final tensing, so we derive clip out of clep. At level 2, we take the output of level 1 and use it as the input for level 2. We do final tensing at level 2, so clip, clip, b is devoiced. Note that the ranking of the 2 relevant constraints is changed crucially on these lines. This is crucial for this theory. And here I present the 2 signals. And let me conclude now, ladies and gentlemen. The Goralian vocalic system is richer than that of standard Polish. Specifically, Goralian has 8 vowels, 1 low vowel, 4 mid vowels, and 3 high vowels. All Goralian vowels are underlying, as I have shown. Yet some of them are derivable by phonological rules in a specific context. One such rule is final tensing presented today. Further, a featurable classification of Goralian vowels calls for the feature plus minus ATR. This feature next to the feature plus minus bag proves distinctive for the mid-sectional vowels in Goralian. Unlike in standard Polish, final tensing is productive in Goralian. It is responsible for surface contrast of the Goralian mid vowels in their position before a word final voiced consonant. Also, final tensing is not surface true in Goralian. This is because of the opacity between final tensing and final devoicing. Yet again. Namely, final tensing applies to words that are subject to final devoicing, the rule which actually erases the context for final tensing. Consequently, Goralian has surface forms in which tense vowels stand before a word final voiceless consonant. In terms of standard OT, standard optimality theory, evaluation of such surface forms inevitably leads to a ranking paradox. This type of opacity, however, is readily accounted for in DOT by postulating that final tensing operates at level 1, while final devoicing operates at level 2. And this is it for today. Thank you. I'll be happy to address your questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Good questions. Brilliant. Okay, so maybe I'll break this silence a bit. With, yes. My first impression when I read the topic of your presentation and your name, your full name, is an obvious correlation for me. And therefore the question, are you from Zakopane?
I'm from a village close to Zakopane.
Yes, thank you very much. So you are a native user of Goralian?
Yeah, a true native.
Thank you.
I think if I had been born in Zakopane, or let me correct myself, if I had been raised in Zakopane, I wouldn't be speaking Goralian now.
Okay.
Because it's dying out in the city. So it does.
Too many damn tourists.
It sounds ominous, but it's quite true. So the dialect is quite well off in the villages surrounding Zakopane, surrounding the city, which is supposed to be the capital of the dialect.
Exactly.
That's very typical there.
Is it? Yeah, thanks.
Minority languages.
Yes?
Can you tell us a bit more about how you gathered the material? Because you said you recorded people, or?
Yes.
Or?
Oh, I said that I did some field work in Janish.
Right.
So yes, I did record many people, and 15 is many. I just for a start. So I have a lot of material. I think way too much for what I need now. But it is just for future reference. I will keep using it. I haven't even transcribed all the materials.
Yes, do this, please. Because all the people say Goralian is too difficult to tackle it. So you, from the point of view of a native speaker of the dialect, go for it, please.
Thank you for the incentive. I definitely will.
Yeah,
it is very, very interesting. And the system is so interesting. This is just the beginning. So let's hope so. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just one question, but as I'm not the speaker of Polish, I was wondering if the finally voicing, is it a characteristic just for Goralian, or is it also a process that you can find in standard Polish?
Yeah, it's one of the basic processes for standard Polish.
Okay.
Also in across Slavic languages like Russian as well. So it's typical of Slavic languages.
Okay.
So Goralian is not exceptional in this respect. But the thing is, there is this, as I was trying to make it clear, this opaque interaction within this rule, which changes the vowels, and the rule which devoices the consonants. So in the word like clip, the final consonant is voiced in the underlying representation. So this
in the underlying.
Yeah.
Never in the performance.
Yeah,
never voiced.
The surface form is always
okay.
Unless. It's a different story. But if you pronounce the word clip in isolation, it is always divorced.
Okay, but if you have some morphemes sticking on clip, then it would be
always voiced.
Okay, it's just the word family.
Because the morphemes which you can attach to clip, to the root, it will always begin with a vowel. Therefore, it must be.
That shows the underlying voiced characteristic, actually, then of the consonant.
Yeah, kind of. It is one of several. It is one evidence that it is voiced underlying.
There are Slavic languages that actually don't have deep voicing. Most famously, the thing that we used to call Serbo-Croatian now has 5 names, and Western Ukrainian, hence standard. So historically speaking, it's clear what's happened, which is first the processes that produce this wonderful vowel system, then final devoicing. But synchronically, as we heard, right, this causes problems for an old-fashioned OT analysis. And what makes Goralian cooler than standard Polish, but maybe not cooler than some of the dialects of this region, is that they have this alternation not just for u, right, but they have the extra vowels, hence o. I'll let the native speaker pronounce. And but in the other voice that you can hear for this word, chib, it's merged with the high vowel. So chib, but cheba, right? Yeah. And you will never hear that pause now. You have to go deep into the countryside to hear that.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. This is very true. Speaking of diachronics, this is totally true. As you said, I do sing.
Are you going to touch the Goralian prosody?
Prosody?
Yes.
Yes. I might. You seem interested.
Yes, I'm very interested because the Goralian prosody and the phenomenon the Goralians actually perform with vowels, like prolonging the vowels and making the entire intonation trick with it. This is something really fascinating.
Kind of, yes.
Yes, if I may ask you, please, of producing an utterance in Goralian, like 2 or 3 sentences, it will give a bigger picture for this, for the prosody?
Obviously. Do you want me to do it now?
Yes, please.
Why not? Is it
Just one
the
is a-
schedule?
yeah.
So maybe you could discuss it during the lunch break?
Oh, you could.
Yeah, so
Okay, if you say so. Thank you very much.